The crash of breaking glass echoed through the marble hallway, followed by a sharp cry that made Naomi's blood run cold. She dropped the fresh linens she'd been folding and ran toward Eleanor's bedroom, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. In the 6 months she'd worked as a maid in the Harrington mansion, she'd witnessed Camille's coldness toward her mother-in-law, the way she spoke to the elderly woman as if she were a burden rather than a person. But this was different. This was worse. Naomi pushed open the bedroom door to find Eleanor Harrington sitting in her wheelchair by the window, tears streaming down her weathered face. Shattered pieces of a water glass glittered on the hardwood floor around her. Camille Harrington stood over her, arms crossed, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping against her designer dress. "You're pathetic," Camille hissed at Eleanor. "Dropping things, making messes. Julian's wasting his money keeping you here when you should be in a home." "Mrs. Harrington," Naomi said, stepping into the room despite her trembling hands. "Is everything all right?" Camille's head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. "This doesn't concern you. Get back to work." But Naomi had already seen the medication bottles on the nightstand, had already noticed that Eleanor's morning pills were still sitting there untouched though it was nearly noon. She'd seen this before, over the past few weeks. Pills forgotten. Meals served cold. Physical therapy appointments mysteriously cancelled. Each time she'd mentioned it to Camille, she'd been told to mind her business. "Mrs. Eleanor needs her medication," Naomi said, her voice steadier than she felt. She moved past Camille and knelt beside the wheelchair, carefully avoiding the broken glass. "Let me help you, I said this doesn't concern you," Camille snapped, grabbing Naomi's arm. "You're the maid, not her nurse. Know your place." Naomi looked up at Camille, then at Eleanor's frightened face, and made a decision that would change everything. "No." The single word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Camille's mouth fell open in shock. "I'm not leaving her like this," Naomi continued, gently taking Eleanor's shaking hands in her own. "Mrs. Eleanor, when was the last time you had your heart medication?" Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. "Yesterday morning." Camille said I was taking too many pills, that I was being dramatic about my condition. Naomi's jaw tightened. Eleanor had a serious heart condition that required strict medication schedules. Missing even one dose could be dangerous. Missing multiple doses could be fatal. "You're fired," Camille said coldly. "Pack your things and get out." "Then you'll have to call security to remove me," Naomi replied, reaching for Eleanor's medication bottles. "Because I'm not leaving her." That's when the front door opened downstairs. Heavy footsteps moved through the foyer, quick and purposeful. Naomi heard the distinctive sound of luggage wheels on marble, then a deep voice calling out. "Mother! Camille! I'm home early." Julian Harrington had returned 3 days ahead of schedule from his business trip to Tokyo. And he was about to discover that the home he'd left behind was not the home he thought it was. Camille's face went pale. She released Naomi's arm and tried to compose herself, smoothing her dress and fixing her hair. But there was no time. Julian's footsteps were already on the stairs, coming closer. "In here," Eleanor called out, her voice gaining strength. Julian appeared in the doorway, still in his travel clothes, his dark hair slightly disheveled from the flight. His eyes swept the room, taking in the broken glass, his mother's tears, Camille's guilty expression, and Naomi kneeling beside the wheelchair with medication bottles in her hands. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Would you keep silent if you saw someone being mistreated, or would you risk everything to protect them? Subscribe to see how one woman's courage changes everything." The silence in Eleanor's bedroom was suffocating. Naomi watched Julian's expression shift from confusion to something darker as his eyes moved from his crying mother to his wife's defensive posture to the untouched medication bottles Naomi was still holding. "Julian, darling, you're home early," Camille said, her voice sugary sweet as she moved toward him. "We weren't expecting you until Friday. This is just a little misunderstanding with the help." "The help has a name," Julian said, his eyes not leaving his mother. "Mother, are you all right?" Eleanor's hands trembled in her lap. Naomi could see the fear in the older woman's eyes, the way she glanced at Camille before speaking. It broke Naomi's heart. In the months she'd worked here, Eleanor had shown her nothing but kindness. She deserved better than this. Tell him, Naomi said softly, squeezing Eleanor's hand. Please. Tell him the truth. Naomi, Eleanor whispered, you'll lose your job. I already lost it, Naomi replied, managing a small smile despite the situation. Mrs. Camille fired me 5 minutes ago. So I have nothing left to lose by telling the truth. But you need someone to speak up for you. Julian crossed the room in 3 long strides, kneeling beside his mother's wheelchair. Mother, please. What's happening here? Eleanor looked at her son, and something in his genuine concern seemed to break through her fear. She's been withholding my medication, she said, her voice cracking. For weeks now. She says I'm being dramatic, that I'm faking how serious my condition is. She cancelled my physical therapy appointments. She serves my meals cold and hours late. And when I complain or ask for help, she what? Julian's voice was hard as steel. She tells me I'm a burden, Eleanor finished, tears streaming down her face again. That you're wasting money on me. That I should be in a nursing home where I won't bother anyone. Naomi watched Julian's face transform. The successful businessman vanished, replaced by a son confronting the mistreatment of his mother. He stood slowly, turning to face Camille. Is this true? He asked. Of course not, Camille said, but her voice lacked conviction. Your mother is confused. Her medication makes her forgetful. This girl has been putting ideas in her head. This girl saved my life, Eleanor said, finding strength in her voice. Naomi's the only one who's shown me any kindness in this house. She's been making sure I eat properly, helping me with exercises the therapist taught me. She even bought me a heating pad with her own money when I complained about my arthritis. She's been protecting me. Julian looked at Naomi, really looked at her, for the first time since he'd come home. She met his gaze steadily, still kneeling beside his mother, still holding those medication bottles like evidence of everything that had gone wrong in his absence. How long has this been happening? He asked Naomi. I've worked here for 6 months, Naomi answered honestly. The first 3 months, Mrs. Camille was distant with Mrs. Eleanor, but not harmful. Then you started traveling more for business. That's when things changed. At first it was small things. Forgetting to tell me about appointments. Not passing along messages. But the last 2 months, it's gotten worse. The medication schedule being ignored. The verbal comments. Today was the worst I've seen. She's lying to make herself look important, Camille interjected. She's probably trying to manipulate you for more money. Camille, Julian said, his voice cutting through her protests like a knife, there's a broken glass on the floor. My mother is crying. Her medication is clearly hours overdue based on the schedule posted on that board. And you're standing here trying to blame everyone except yourself. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Dr. Coleman? It's Julian Harrington. I need you to come to the house immediately. It's about my mother. Yes, it's urgent. Thank you. Then he made another call. James. I need you at the house within the hour. We're beginning divorce proceedings. Today. Camille's face went white. You can't be serious. Over this? Over what some maid is saying? Over the fact that you've been neglecting and emotionally abusing my mother, Julian said coldly. Get out of this room. Now. Camille opened her mouth to argue, but something in Julian's expression made her think better of it. She turned on her heel and left, her designer heels clicking angrily against the hardwood floor. Julian turned back to his mother and Naomi. I'm sorry, he said to Eleanor. I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening. I should have been here more. I should have paid attention. You were building your business, Eleanor said gently. You trusted your wife to care for your home. That's not your fault. It is my fault, Julian insisted. He looked at Naomi. And you? Naomi, is it? Yes, sir. Naomi Brooks. You protected my mother when no one else would. You risked your job. You stood up to Camille. He paused, clearly thinking. My wife may have fired you, but I'm the one who owns this house and pays the salaries. You're not fired. In fact, I'm promoting you. Naomi blinked in surprise. Sir, I want to hire you as my mother's full-time caregiver. Not as a maid, but as her personal care specialist. I'll triple your current salary. You'll have full authority over her care, her schedule, her meals, everything. I'll arrange for additional training if you need it. And I want you to move into the guest house on the property so you can be available whenever she needs you. Julian, that's too much, Naomi started to say, but Eleanor grabbed her hand. Please, the older woman said. Please stay. I trust you. You're the only one I trust. Naomi looked at Eleanor's pleading face, then at Julian's sincere expression. Every instinct told her this was too good to be true, that accepting would somehow make things complicated. But she thought about her tiny apartment across town, the second job she worked on weekends to make ends meet, her sister Tasha's medical bills that kept piling up. She thought about Eleanor's kindness, about the way the older woman had treated her like a person rather than just hired help. And she thought about what Julian had said in her memory meeting earlier that day. When offers should not be refused, they should be accepted with gratitude. Thank you, Naomi said, her voice thick with emotion. I accept. I'll take care of her, I promise. Julian smiled for the first time since he'd arrived home, and Naomi felt something shift in the room, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. This was the beginning of something new, something better. But neither of them realized just how much their lives were about to change. The guest house was nicer than any place Naomi had ever lived. Large windows let in natural light, there was a full kitchen, a comfortable bedroom, and a living area that felt more spacious than her entire apartment. As she unpacked the few boxes she'd brought from her old place, she kept having to remind herself this was real. 3 days had passed since Julian came home. 3 days since her life had completely transformed. Dr. Coleman had examined Eleanor thoroughly and confirmed that missing her medications had put dangerous strain on her heart. She'd also documented the weight loss, the muscle atrophy from cancelled physical therapy, the signs of emotional stress. All of it went into a report that Julian's attorney would use in the divorce proceedings. Camille had moved into the city apartment Julian kept for business trips. She was furious, but her anger was nothing compared to Julian's determination to protect his mother. He'd been working from home, reorganizing his schedule to spend more time at the estate. And he'd been checking on Eleanor constantly, as if he could make up for months of neglect through sheer presence. Naomi had settled into her new role quickly. She'd created a proper schedule for Eleanor's medications, coordinated with Dr. Coleman on the treatment plan, and arranged for the physical therapist to resume sessions. Eleanor was already looking better, her color improving, her spirits lifting. A knock on the guesthouse door pulled Naomi from her thoughts. She opened it to find Julian standing there with a tablet in his hands. Sorry to interrupt, he said. I wanted to discuss Mother's care plan with you, if you have a moment. Of course, Naomi said, stepping aside to let him in. Would you like some tea? I just made a pot. That would be nice, thank you. They sat at the small kitchen table, and Naomi poured tea into 2 mugs. Julian looked tired, she noticed. There were shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders. Running a business empire while dealing with a divorce and his mother's recovery couldn't be easy. How is she doing? Julian asked, taking a sip of tea. Better every day, Naomi assured him. Her vitals are stable, she's eating properly, and the physical therapy is helping her regain strength. Dr. Coleman is pleased with her progress. Thanks to you, Julian said. I've been going through the household records. Camille fired 2 previous caregivers before you. Both of them tried to report concerns about Mother's treatment. I was traveling, didn't see the reports. She told me they were stealing, that they were incompetent. I believed her. The pain in his voice was evident. Naomi reached across the table and touched his hand briefly, a gesture of comfort. You trusted your wife. That's what marriage is supposed to be built on. You couldn't have known. I should have paid more attention, Julian said. I got so focused on expanding the business, proving myself, that I neglected what mattered most. I won't make that mistake again. Mrs. Eleanor knows you love her, Naomi said gently. She told me yesterday how proud she is of everything you've built. She doesn't blame you. Julian looked at her, and Naomi saw something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes. but also curiosity, a growing awareness of her as more than just an employee. "Tell me about you," he said. "I realized I know almost nothing about the woman who saved my mother's life." Naomi hesitated. She wasn't used to employers being interested in her personal life. "There's not much to tell. I'm 28. I grew up in Chicago. My parents passed away when I was young, so my older sister Tasha raised me. I've been working as a maid for 5 years, trying to save money." "Save money for what?" Julian asked. "Nursing school," Naomi admitted. "It's always been my dream to become a nurse. But between bills and helping Tasha with her medical expenses, I've never been able to save enough for tuition." "What kind of medical expenses?" "She has rheumatoid arthritis. It's gotten worse over the past few years. The medication is expensive, and she can't work as much as she used to." Naomi shook her head. "But that's not your concern. You've already done so much for me." Julian was quiet for a moment, looking thoughtful. Then he set down his mug and leaned forward. "What if I paid for your nursing education?" Naomi's eyes widened. "What? You want to be a nurse? You're already providing excellent care for my mother. Why not get the formal training?" Julian spoke quickly, as if he'd already made up his mind. "I'll cover your tuition, books, everything. You can study while continuing to care for mother. We'll adjust your schedule around your classes. And I'll cover your sister's medical expenses." "Mr. Harrington, I can't," Naomi started, but he held up a hand. "Julian. Please call me Julian. And yes, you can. Think of it as an investment. Once you're a registered nurse, you'll be even better equipped to care for mother. Plus, you'll have a degree and a career that no one can take away from you. You've given my family so much. Let me give you this." Naomi felt tears prickling her eyes. This was more than she'd ever dreamed of. The chance to pursue her education, to help Tasha, to finally stop struggling to make ends meet. Every practical part of her brain said to accept that this was the opportunity of a lifetime. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Julian said simply. "Say you'll let me help you the way you've helped us." Naomi thought about her earlier resolution, about accepting help with gratitude rather than pride. She thought about the kindness Eleanor had shown her, and the genuine care she saw in Julian's eyes. This wasn't charity. This was a man who wanted to do something good for someone who'd done good for his family. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger. "Thank you. I'll work hard, I promise. I won't let you down." Julian smiled, and Naomi felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I know you won't. We'll get you enrolled this week. There's a good nursing program at the community college about 20 minutes from here. Classes start in a month." They talked for another hour, discussing logistics and schedules. By the time Julian left, Naomi's head was spinning with possibilities. She called Tasha immediately to share the news. "Naomi, this is huge," her sister said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're really going to nursing school?" "I'm really going," Naomi confirmed, unable to stop smiling. "And he's going to help with your medical bills too." "This Julian sounds like a good man," Tasha said carefully. "Just be careful, okay? Rich people can be complicated." "I know," Naomi assured her. "But right now, he's just someone who's grateful I helped his mother. Nothing more." But as she hung up and looked out the window at the main house where Julian and Eleanor were having dinner, Naomi couldn't help but wonder if that was entirely true. There had been something in the way Julian looked at her, something in the long conversation they'd shared over tea. Something that felt like the beginning of a connection neither of them had expected. She pushed the thought away. She was his employee. He was her boss. And he was in the middle of a divorce. The last thing either of them needed was complications. But sometimes, life had a way of complicating things whether you wanted it to or not. The divorce papers were served on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, Camille had launched her counterattack. Naomi was in Eleanor's room, helping the older woman with her afternoon physical therapy exercises, when Julian's attorney James Porter arrived looking grim. "We have a problem," James said without preamble. Camille's attorney just filed a motion claiming that Eleanor is being held against her will and that Naomi is manipulating an elderly woman for financial gain. Naomi's stomach dropped. What? It's a strategic move, James explained, sitting down in the armchair across from Eleanor's therapy area. She's trying to discredit both of you to strengthen her position in the divorce. She's claiming that Naomi has been isolating Eleanor from friends and family, that the medication issues were actually caused by Naomi's incompetence, and that Julian is being manipulated into believing false accusations. That's ridiculous, Eleanor said, her voice sharp with anger. Naomi has done nothing but help me. Camille is the one who isolated me. She stopped my friends from visiting, said I was too ill for company. I know, James said gently. And we'll prove that. But we need to be prepared. Camille's attorney is going to try to depose Naomi, question her credentials, her background, everything. They're going to make this ugly. Naomi felt her hands trembling. She'd known Camille wouldn't go quietly, but she hadn't expected this. She thought about her sister, about the nursing school enrollment she'd just completed. What if this legal battle destroyed everything? I'll withdraw my statement, Naomi heard herself say. If it helps Mrs. Eleanor, I'll say I was mistaken about what I saw. Absolutely not, Julian said from the doorway. No one had heard him come in. He strode into the room, his expression fierce. You told the truth, Naomi. We're not backing down from the truth just because Camille wants to throw money at lawyers. But Mr. Harrington, Naomi protested, if this becomes a big legal case, it could affect you, your business, Mrs. Eleanor's reputation. Maybe it's better if I just step away. Julian, he corrected automatically. And no. You stood up for my mother when no one else would. Now I'm standing up for you. He turned to James. What do we need to do? James pulled out a legal pad. First, we need comprehensive medical documentation. Dr. Coleman's report is good, but we need a full medical history showing the decline that happened while Camille was in charge and the improvement since Naomi took over. Second, we need character witnesses. Anyone who can testify to Naomi's good character and Camille's behavior. Third, we need to document everything going forward. Every interaction, every treatment, every improvement in Eleanor's condition. Done, Julian said. What else? I'd recommend having Naomi move back to her apartment, James said carefully. Living on the property while all this is happening gives ammunition to the manipulation claims. No, Eleanor spoke up firmly. Naomi stays. I need her here, and I won't be separated from her because of my son's vindictive ex-wife. Julian looked at his mother, then at James. Mother stays with Naomi. We'll install security cameras in all common areas of the house. Everything will be documented and above board. Camille won't be able to claim anything inappropriate is happening. James sighed but nodded. All right. But Naomi, you need to understand what you're in for. Depositions can be brutal. They're going to dig into every aspect of your life. Past relationships, financial history, any mistakes you've ever made. Are you prepared for that? Naomi thought about the years she'd spent struggling, the times she'd had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, the shame she'd felt having to ask Tasha for help when she was the younger sister. Her life was an open book of struggle and survival. Let them look. I'm prepared, she said. I have nothing to hide. Everything I've done has been to help Mrs. Eleanor. Good, James said, making notes. Now, there's something else. Julian mentioned wanting to pay for your nursing education and your sister's medical expenses. We need to structure that carefully so it can't be construed as payment for testimony. Then set it up as a standard employee benefit, Julian suggested. A healthcare scholarship program for staff members and their families. Naomi just happens to be the first recipient. That could work, James agreed. I'll draft the paperwork. Naomi, you'll need to sign some documents acknowledging that these benefits are not contingent on your testimony or involvement in the divorce case. Of course, Naomi said. Over the next hour, James outlined the strategy for defending against Camille's claims. It was overwhelming, but Julian remained calm and focused throughout, making decisions quickly and confidently. Naomi found herself watching him, seeing a different side of the billionaire businessman. He wasn't just wealthy and powerful. He was protective, loyal, and willing to fight for what was right. When James finally left, Eleanor was tired from the stress. Naomi helped her into bed for an afternoon rest, then stepped out into the hallway to find Julian waiting. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I'm sorry you're being dragged into this. If I'd known Camille would retaliate like this." "You couldn't have known," Naomi assured him. "And I meant what I said. I'm prepared to handle whatever comes. Mrs. Eleanor deserves justice, and I'm not going to let Camille intimidate me into silence." Julian looked at her with something like admiration. "You're remarkable, you know that. Most people would have walked away by now. The drama, the legal threats, all of it. But you're still here." "Because it's the right thing to do," Naomi said simply. "And because I care about Mrs. Eleanor. She's been kind to me from the day I started working here. That means something." "It means everything," Julian said softly. They stood in the hallway, close enough that Naomi could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Then Julian's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. He glanced at it and sighed. "I have a conference call in 10 minutes. But Naomi, if you ever need anything, if this gets too hard, you tell me." "All right. All right," she agreed. As Julian walked away, Naomi leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. She'd accepted this position thinking it would be a fresh start, a chance to do meaningful work and save for her dreams. She hadn't expected legal battles, divorce drama, or the complicated feelings that seemed to be developing between her and her employer. Have you ever been caught in someone else's battle but refused to back down? Comment below and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. But she'd made her choice. She was staying. Whatever Camille threw at them, they would face it together. And somehow, that thought made her smile. 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparations. Naomi gave her deposition, sitting in James Porter's office for 6 hours while Camille's attorney tried to poke holes in her story. She held firm, telling the truth calmly and consistently. When they tried to suggest she was after Julian's money, she produced her bank statements showing she'd never asked for anything beyond her original salary. When they questioned her care of Eleanor, Dr. Coleman's detailed medical records proved the dramatic improvement in the patient's health. Camille's case was falling apart, but the woman wouldn't give up. She kept filing motions, demanding investigations, trying to delay the divorce proceedings. It was exhausting for everyone involved. But there were bright spots too. Eleanor was thriving under Naomi's care. She'd regained the weight she'd lost, her physical therapy sessions were going well, and her spirits were higher than they'd been in months. She'd even started having friends over for tea again, something Camille had forbidden during her reign over the household. And Naomi had started nursing school. 2 evenings a week and Saturday mornings, she attended classes at the community college. Julian had been true to his word, covering all her expenses and adjusting her schedule so she could focus on her studies. He'd even hired a part-time assistant to help with Eleanor's care when Naomi was in class. It was during these evening classes that Julian and Eleanor spent time together, catching up on the months he'd been away building his business. And it was during these evenings that Julian began to realize how much he missed Naomi's presence. One Friday evening, after Naomi returned from class, she found Julian and Eleanor in the main house library, playing chess by the fireplace. It was a cozy scene, and Naomi smiled at the sight of them together. "Who's winning?" she asked, setting down her backpack. "Your employer is losing badly," Eleanor said with a mischievous grin. "He's never been good at chess." "That's because you're a ruthless opponent," Julian replied, but he was smiling. He looked up at Naomi. "How was class?" "Good," Naomi said, settling into a nearby chair. "We're learning about cardiac care this week. It's actually really helpful for taking care of Mrs. Eleanor. I can better understand her condition now." "See," Eleanor said to Julian. "I told you she was brilliant. You made the right choice investing in her education." Naomi felt her cheeks warm at the praise. Over the past weeks, Eleanor had become more than just a patient. She'd become a friend, a mentor of sorts. The older woman had lived a fascinating life, and she loved sharing stories from her youth while Naomi helped with her therapy exercises. "Naomi," Julian said, "have you eaten dinner yet?" "Not yet. I was going to make something in the guest house." "Join us instead," Eleanor suggested. We ordered from that Italian place you like, and there's more than enough. Naomi hesitated. She'd been careful to maintain professional boundaries, taking her meals separately, keeping their interactions focused on Eleanor's care. But both Julian and Eleanor were looking at her with such genuine warmth that refusing felt rude. All right, she agreed. Thank you. Over pasta and salad, the three of them talked easily. Eleanor asked about Naomi's classes, genuinely interested in what she was learning. Julian shared stories about his day, the challenges of running a company while managing the divorce. Naomi found herself laughing at his dry humor, enjoying the comfortable dynamic between them. Tell me about your sister, Eleanor said as they cleared the dishes. Tasha, isn't it? Julian mentioned she has health issues. She has rheumatoid arthritis, Naomi explained, grateful that Julian's promised help with medical bills had already started easing Tasha's burden. She's doing better now that she can afford her medication regularly. In fact, she wants to come visit next weekend if that's all right. Of course, Eleanor said immediately. I'd love to meet her. Family is important. After dinner, Eleanor excused herself to rest, leaving Julian and Naomi alone in the library. Julian poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Naomi. I hope I'm not overstepping, he said, but I wanted to thank you properly. Not just for caring for Mother, but for everything. The way you've handled the legal mess, the grace under pressure, all of it. You've thanked me plenty, Naomi said, taking a sip of wine. You're paying for my education, remember? That's practical, Julian said, sitting across from her. This is personal. You've brought life back to this house. Mother is happy again. She laughs, she has energy, she's planning for the future. That's all because of you. Naomi looked down at her wine glass, touched by his words. Your mother is easy to care for. She's kind and funny and wise. I'm lucky to know her. She adores you, Julian said. She told me last week that you're the daughter she never had. Naomi felt tears prickling her eyes. She'd lost her own mother so young, and Eleanor had filled a space she hadn't realized was empty. She's very special to me too. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the fire crackling softly. Then Julian spoke again, his voice quieter. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why haven't you dated anyone? In the months you've been here, you never mention going out, meeting someone. A woman like you should have men lining up. Naomi laughed softly. A woman like me has been too busy surviving to think about dating. Between working multiple jobs and taking care of Tasha, there hasn't been time for romance. Besides, most men aren't interested in a woman who's broke and exhausted all the time. Then most men are idiots, Julian said firmly. You're intelligent, caring, beautiful, and stronger than anyone I've ever met. Any man would be lucky to have your attention. Naomi looked up, surprised by the intensity in his voice. Their eyes met across the space between them, and something electric passed through the air. She saw the way Julian was looking at her, saw the admiration and something more in his gaze. Julian, she said softly, you're going through a divorce. This is a complicated time. I know, he said, setting down his wine glass. I know the timing is terrible. I know I'm your employer and that makes this inappropriate. I know there are 1,000 reasons why I shouldn't be feeling what I'm feeling. But Naomi, I can't stop thinking about you. The way you care for my mother, the way you stand up for what's right, the way you light up when you talk about nursing school. You've become the best part of my day. Naomi's heart was racing. She'd felt the growing connection between them, had tried to ignore it, tried to maintain professional distance. But hearing Julian put it into words made it real, made it impossible to deny. I feel it too, she admitted. But we can't. Not right now. Not while the divorce is ongoing, while I'm your employee, while everything is so complicated. You're right, Julian said, though he looked disappointed. You're absolutely right. I just wanted you to know. So when all this is over, when things are settled, maybe we could see where this goes. Naomi smiled despite the emotional turbulence in her chest. Maybe. Ask me again when Camille is officially your ex-wife and when I'm no longer living in your guest house. Deal, Julian said, returning her smile. I can wait. You're worth waiting for. They finished their wine and said goodnight, but as Naomi walked back to the guest house, she felt like she was floating. Julian Harrington, brilliant businessman and devoted son, had feelings for her. And she had feelings for him. The situation was complicated, the timing was wrong, but the connection was real. For the first time in her life, Naomi allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have both her dreams, a career in nursing and someone to share her life with. But first, they had to survive Camille's vendetta. And that battle was far from over. Tasha Brooks arrived on Saturday morning in a whirlwind of energy and laughter. She was taller than Naomi, with the same warm brown skin and bright smile, but where Naomi was reserved and careful, Tasha was bold and outspoken. "This place is incredible," Tasha said, standing in the guesthouse living room with her mouth open. "Naomi, you're living like a queen." "I'm working," Naomi corrected, but she was grinning. She'd missed her sister. "Come on, I want you to meet Mrs. Eleanor." They walked to the main house, where Eleanor was waiting in the sunroom. Tasha's confident stride faltered slightly when she saw the elegant older woman seated in her wheelchair, but Eleanor's warm smile put her at ease immediately. "You must be Tasha," Eleanor said, extending her hand. "I've heard so much about you. Naomi talks about you constantly. All good things, I hope," Tasha said, shaking her hand gently. "Of course. Your sister is very proud of you." They spent the morning together, and Naomi watched as Tasha charmed Eleanor with stories from their childhood. Her sister had always been good with people, able to make friends anywhere. It was one of the things Naomi loved most about her. Julian joined them for lunch on the terrace. Naomi introduced them nervously, worried about what Tasha would think. Her sister had been skeptical when Naomi explained the whole situation over the phone, concerned that Julian was taking advantage of her kindness. But watching Julian interact with Eleanor, seeing the genuine affection between them and the respect he showed Naomi, Tasha's skepticism began to fade. After lunch, while Eleanor was resting and Julian was on a business call, Tasha pulled Naomi aside in the garden. "Okay, so he's not what I expected," Tasha admitted. "What did you expect?" Naomi asked. "I don't know. Some arrogant rich guy who sees you as the help. But he's not like that. He looks at you like you're the most important person in the room. And his mother clearly adores you." Tasha paused, studying her sister's face. "You have feelings for him." It wasn't a question. Naomi sighed. "Is it that obvious?" "To me, yes. I know you, Naomi. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at him. Does he feel the same?" "He says he does. But it's complicated. He's still technically married, I work for him, there's the whole legal mess with the divorce. We agreed to wait until things are settled before pursuing anything." "That's very mature of you both," Tasha said. "But Naomi, be careful. Rich men have a way of making promises they don't keep. I don't want to see you hurt." "He's not like that," Naomi said, then paused. "At least, I don't think he is. But you're right to be cautious. I'm trying to protect my heart while still being open to the possibility." "That's all I can ask," Tasha said, squeezing her sister's hand. "Just promise me you'll be smart about this. Don't let yourself get so caught up that you forget who you are and what you're worth." "I promise," Naomi said. That evening, the four of them had dinner together. Julian had arranged for a caterer to prepare a special meal, and they ate on the terrace under string lights as the sun set. It felt like family, Naomi realized. Not employer and employee, but a group of people who genuinely cared about each other. After dinner, Tasha excused herself to take a phone call, and Julian stepped inside to check his email, leaving Naomi alone with Eleanor. "Your sister is wonderful," Eleanor said. "I can see where you get your strength from. She raised me," Naomi said simply. "After our parents died, she gave up her own dreams to make sure I had a childhood. Everything I am is because of her. And everything my son is becoming again is because of you," Eleanor said. She reached out and took Naomi's hand. "I see the way he looks at you, dear. And I see the way you look at him." Naomi felt her cheeks flush. "Mrs. Eleanor, don't be embarrassed. Love is nothing to be ashamed of. But I want you to know something." Eleanor's expression grew serious. Julian was different when he married Camille. He was trying so hard to build his business, to prove himself worthy of the family legacy. He chose a woman who looked good on paper, who came from the right background. But there was no real love there, no partnership. Just two people using each other to get what they wanted. "I'm sorry," Naomi said softly. "Don't be." It taught him valuable lessons. And now, watching him with you, I see a different man. He's more present, more genuine. He laughs more. He's rediscovered what matters. You did that for him, just like you did it for me. I didn't do anything special, Naomi protested. You showed us both what kindness looks like. What integrity looks like. What it means to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Eleanor squeezed her hand. My son is falling in love with you, Naomi. And I want you to know that you have my complete blessing and support. When he asks you to be part of this family officially, I hope you'll say yes. Naomi felt tears welling up. You're assuming a lot, Mrs. Eleanor. We haven't even gone on a date. Call it a mother's intuition, Eleanor said with a smile. Now go find Tasha before she thinks we've kidnapped you permanently. That night, after Tasha had driven home promising to visit again soon, Naomi sat in her living room thinking about everything Eleanor had said. The older woman's blessing meant more than she could express. But it also made everything feel more real, more possible. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Julian standing there, hands in his pockets. Can I come in? He asked. Of course. They sat on her small couch, and Julian turned to face her. Mother talked to me after dinner. She told me she gave us her blessing. She did, Naomi confirmed. She's a romantic. She's a wise woman who knows what matters, Julian corrected. Naomi, I know we agreed to wait. But every day that passes, every conversation we have, every smile you give me, I'm more certain that you're exactly who I've been looking for my entire life. Julian, Naomi whispered. I'm not asking you to make any decisions now, he continued. I'm not asking for anything except patience. But I need you to know that when this divorce is final, when we can move forward without any complications, I'm going to do everything in my power to show you how much you mean to me. Naomi looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, the hope in his expression. She thought about everything she'd learned about him over these months. His devotion to his mother, his integrity in business, his willingness to admit mistakes and make them right. This wasn't a fantasy or a temporary infatuation. This was real. I'll be here, she said simply. When you're ready, I'll be here. Julian smiled, and in that moment, Naomi knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The divorce would end, Camille would fade into the past, and they would have their chance at something beautiful. She just had to be patient a little longer. The final divorce hearing took place on a cold November morning. Naomi didn't attend, but Julian called her immediately afterward. It's done, he said, and she could hear the relief in his voice. The judge approved everything. Camille gets a settlement, but nowhere near what she was asking for. Mother is officially protected by the court order, and all the false claims against you have been dismissed with prejudice. Naomi sank onto her couch, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. It's really over. It's really over. Camille has to stay away from the property. If she tries to contact Mother or harass you in any way, she'll be in contempt of court. James did an incredible job. That's wonderful news, Naomi said, genuinely happy. The past months had been stressful for everyone, but especially for Julian, who'd had to relive his failed marriage in excruciating legal detail. I'm going to take Mother out to celebrate, Julian said. Would you join us for dinner tonight? Somewhere nice, the three of us? I'd love to, Naomi agreed. That evening, they went to an elegant restaurant overlooking the bay. Eleanor was radiant, clearly relieved that the ordeal was finally behind them. She ordered champagne and toasted to new beginnings. To surviving difficult times and coming out stronger, Eleanor said, raising her glass. To family, Julian added, looking at both women. To truth and justice, Naomi contributed with a smile. They lingered over dinner, talking and laughing. Other diners glanced their way occasionally, probably wondering about the unusual trio, the elegant elderly woman, the handsome businessman, and the young black woman who clearly wasn't just an employee based on how they interacted. Let them wonder, Naomi thought. She was done caring what strangers thought. After dinner, they returned home. Eleanor excused herself to bed early, giving Naomi and Julian a meaningful look before she left. The message was clear: the divorce was final. There were no more obstacles. Julian walked Naomi to the guest house, and they stood on the small porch in the cool night air. "So," Julian said, his hands in his pockets, "I'm officially a divorced man as of 3 o'clock this afternoon." "Congratulations," Naomi said with a slight smile. "How does it feel?" "Like freedom. Like relief. Like the chance to start over and do things right this time." He took a step closer. "Naomi Brooks, would you like to have dinner with me? Just the two of us? A real date?" Naomi's heart skipped. This was it, the moment they'd been waiting for. No more complications, no more reasons to hold back. "Yes," she said. "I would like that very much." Julian's face lit up with a smile that made him look years younger. "Tomorrow night? I know a quiet place where we won't be interrupted. Tomorrow night sounds perfect." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, a tender gesture that made Naomi's breath catch. "I'm going to court you properly, Naomi. Flowers, dates, getting to know each other outside of this house and mother's care. I want to do this right." "I'd like that too," Naomi said softly. Julian left with a promise to pick her up at 7 the next evening. Naomi went inside and immediately called Tasha. "He asked me out," she said as soon as her sister answered. "A real date? Tomorrow night?" "And?" Tasha prompted. "And I said yes." "Oh Tasha, I'm nervous and excited and terrified all at once." "That's how you're supposed to feel," Tasha said warmly. "Listen, Naomi. I know I was skeptical at first. But I've seen how he treats you, how he treats his mother, how he handled that whole divorce mess. He's a good man. Just be yourself tomorrow night. If he can't love you for who you are, then he doesn't deserve you." "When did you get so wise?" Naomi asked. "I learned from my little sister," Tasha replied. The next day crawled by. Naomi went through her usual routine with Eleanor, but her mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. Eleanor noticed, of course. "You're distracted," the older woman said during their afternoon therapy session. "I have a date tonight," Naomi admitted. "I know. Julian told me." "He's very nervous." Julian Harrington, billionaire businessman, is nervous about a date. "He's nervous because you matter to him," Eleanor said gently. "This isn't just a casual evening out. You both know this could be the start of something significant. That's worth being nervous about." That evening, Naomi dressed carefully in a simple but elegant navy dress. She kept her makeup natural, her hair in soft curls. When Julian knocked on her door at exactly 7, his expression when he saw her made all the careful preparation worth it. "You look beautiful," he said, handing her a bouquet of sunflowers. "I remembered you mentioned these were your favorite." "They are," Naomi said, touched that he'd remembered such a small detail. "Thank you." The restaurant was intimate and quiet, just as Julian had promised. They had a corner table with a view of the city lights. Over wine and excellent food, they talked about everything: childhoods, dreams, fears, the books they loved, the places they wanted to visit. "Tell me something about yourself that I don't know," Julian said over dessert. Naomi thought for a moment. "I'm terrified of failure. That's why it took me so long to pursue nursing school. I was afraid that if I tried and couldn't do it, I'd have to admit I wasn't good enough. And now?" Julian asked gently. "Now I realize that not trying is worse than failing. You helped me see that. When you offered to pay for my education, you showed me that sometimes you have to accept help and take the leap." She paused. "What about you? Tell me something I don't know." "I'm terrified of repeating my parents' marriage," Julian admitted. They stayed together for appearances, but there was no love there. Just duty and obligation. When I married Camille, I told myself it would be different. But I chose someone who fit the image of what a successful man's wife should be rather than someone I actually connected with. I'm afraid of making that mistake again. Is that why you've been so careful about this? About us?" Naomi asked. Partly. But also because you're too important to rush. I don't want this to be a rebound or a reaction to my failed marriage. I want it to be real. It feels real to me, Naomi said softly. Julian reached across the table and took her hand. It feels real to me too. They talked until the restaurant began closing, reluctant to end the evening. On the drive home, Julian held her hand, and Naomi felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. This wasn't the dramatic, overwhelming passion you saw in movies. It was deeper, steadier, more real. It was the feeling of coming home. At her door, Julian pulled her gently into his arms. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. Naomi answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was soft, sweet, full of promise. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "I'll see you tomorrow," Julian said. "Tomorrow," Naomi agreed. As she got ready for bed that night, Naomi looked at the sunflowers in their vase and thought about how much her life had changed. A year ago, she'd been struggling to survive, working multiple jobs, watching her dreams slip further away. Now she was in nursing school, helping someone she cared about, and dating a man who saw her not as the help but as an equal, a partner, someone worth investing in. Life had a way of surprising you, she thought. Sometimes, when you stood up for what was right, good things followed. And this was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Julian and Naomi dated properly. Dinner at quiet restaurants, walks along the waterfront, movie nights in the guest house with Eleanor occasionally joining them. They took things slowly, getting to know each other as more than employer and employee, more than caregiver and patient's son. Julian was thoughtful and attentive, remembering small details about Naomi's preferences and surprising her with little gifts. Not expensive jewelry or extravagant gestures, but meaningful things, a book by her favorite author, a heating pad for when her back hurt after long study sessions, coffee from the shop near her campus. Naomi discovered sides of Julian she hadn't seen before. He was funny, with a dry wit that caught her off guard. He was passionate about architecture and could spend hours talking about building design. He volunteered at a youth center in the city, mentoring young entrepreneurs. He wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He was a complete person with interests and values and a genuine desire to make a positive impact. But there was a tension building beneath the surface. They were falling for each other quickly, deeply, and both were afraid to say it out loud. They'd kiss goodnight at her door, the heat between them growing more intense each time, but Julian never pushed for more. He was determined to do this right, to build a foundation before taking the next step. It was Eleanor who finally pushed them to have an honest conversation. 3 weeks after their first date, she invited them both for tea in her sitting room. When they arrived, she looked at them with a mixture of affection and exasperation. "Sit down, both of you," she said. "We need to talk." Julian and Naomi exchanged glances and sat on the sofa across from Eleanor's wheelchair. "I've watched you two dance around each other for weeks now," Eleanor continued. "You're clearly in love, but you're both too cautious to admit it. Julian, you're afraid of moving too fast after your divorce. Naomi, you're worried about the class difference and what people will think. Am I wrong?" "No, you're not wrong," Julian admitted. "Then let me tell you something," Eleanor said firmly. "Life is too short to waste time being cautious when you've found something real. I almost lost my life because people were too cautious to speak up about what was happening to me. Naomi wasn't cautious. She risked her job to protect me. That's the kind of courage you both need now." "Mother," Julian started, but Eleanor held up her hand. "Let me finish. Julian, you're a good man. You made one mistake in choosing the wrong partner, but that doesn't define you. You've learned, you've grown, and you've found someone who challenges you to be better. Don't let fear keep you from happiness." She turned to Naomi. "And you, dear girl. You've spent your whole life believing you weren't good enough, that you had to struggle and fight for every scrap of dignity and success. But you are enough. You've always been enough. You deserve love and happiness as much as anyone." Naomi felt tears stinging her eyes. Eleanor's words hit deeper than she'd expected, touching wounds she'd carried for years. "Now," Eleanor said with satisfaction, "I'm going to take a nap. You two are going to stay here and have an honest conversation about what you want. No more dancing around it." Be brave. She wheeled herself out of the room, leaving Julian and Naomi alone in charged silence. Julian turned to face Naomi on the sofa. She's right, you know. About all of it. I know, Naomi said softly. I love you, Julian said, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them back too long. I'm in love with you, Naomi. I have been for months, maybe since the day I came home and found you protecting my mother. You're the strongest, kindest, most genuine person I've ever met. You make me want to be better. You make me believe in possibilities I'd given up on. Naomi's tears spilled over. I love you too. I've been so afraid to say it, afraid that I was reading too much into this, afraid that the differences between us would eventually matter more than what we feel. But I do love you, Julian. You see me in a way no one else ever has. You believe in me, support my dreams, treat me like an equal. You make me feel like I can be anything I want to be. Julian pulled her into his arms, and they held each other tightly. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying a little, but smiling too. So what now? Naomi asked. Now we stop being cautious, Julian said. We build a life together. We face whatever challenges come up as partners. We stop worrying about what other people think and focus on what we know is true. What do we know is true? Naomi asked. That we love each other. That we're better together than apart. That your background and my wealth don't matter nearly as much as the connection we share. He cupped her face in his hands. Naomi, I know this is fast. I know we've only been officially dating for a few weeks. But I also know that I want you in my life permanently. I want to wake up next to you, build a future with you, support your dreams while you support mine. I want everything with you. I want that too, Naomi whispered. But what about the practical things? I'm still your employee, technically. I still live in your guest house. People will talk. Then let them talk, Julian said firmly. We'll handle the employment situation. I can transfer mother's care to you independently, hire you as a contractor rather than an employee. We'll find a way to make it work that's above board and professional. As for living arrangements, that's up to you. You can stay in the guest house, or you can move into the main house with me. Or we can look for a place together. Whatever you're comfortable with. What would you choose, playing it safe or taking a chance on love? Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next. You're sure about this? Naomi asked. About us? About the complications it will bring? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Julian said. The question is, are you sure? Because I need you to be all in, Naomi. I need to know that you're not going to run when things get complicated or when people judge us. Naomi thought about everything she'd learned over the past months. She'd learned to accept help with gratitude. She'd learned that sometimes taking a risk was worth it. She'd learned that she was stronger and more worthy than she'd ever believed. I'm all in, she said. I love you, Julian Harrington. And I want to build a life with you, complications and all. Julian kissed her then, deep and passionate, a kiss that held all the promise of their future. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and smiling. We should tell Mother, Julian said. Although I'm fairly certain she already knows. They found Eleanor in her bedroom, looking suspiciously awake for someone who'd claimed she was going to nap. She smiled when they walked in hand. So, she asked. So we're together, Julian said. Officially, completely together. And Mother, I need to ask you something. Ask away. Will you be okay if Naomi and if we get married eventually? If she becomes your daughter-in-law officially? Eleanor's face lit up with joy. I've been waiting for you to figure that out for months. Of course I'll be okay with it. I'll be thrilled. Naomi is already the daughter of my heart. Making it legal is just a formality. Naomi felt herself tearing up again. Thank you, Mrs. Eleanor. For everything. For your kindness, your support, your blessing. Call me Eleanor from now on, the older woman said. Or better yet, call me Mom. If you're going to be my son's wife, you might as well get used to being part of the family. That evening, after a celebratory dinner that Eleanor insisted on despite being tired, Julian walked Naomi back to the guest house. At the door, He pulled her close. "This is the beginning of our real story," he said. "Everything before this was just the prologue." "I like the sound of that," Naomi said, smiling up at him. "So what happens in Chapter 1? "In Chapter 1, we're happy," Julian said simply. "We work together, we support each other, we build something beautiful. And we don't let anything or anyone make us doubt what we have." "I can live with that," Naomi agreed. They kissed goodnight, and Naomi went inside feeling lighter than she had in years. She'd spent so long fighting, struggling, trying to prove she was worthy of good things. But Julian and Eleanor had shown her that she didn't need to prove anything. She was already worthy. She was already enough. And now, she was loved. The complications and challenges would come, she knew. They always did. But they would face them together, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd chosen each other despite every reason not to. And that made all the difference. 6 months after their relationship began, Julian proposed. Not in some grand public gesture, but in the kitchen at 3 in the morning when they'd both come down for water and ended up talking until sunrise. He'd taken her hand and simply asked if she'd marry him, spend her life with him, build a family with him. Naomi had said yes before he'd even finished the question. They planned a small wedding, just family and close friends. But before that could happen, Julian had an idea that would change both their lives in a different way. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they reviewed Eleanor's care schedule, "about what happened with Mother, about how you almost didn't speak up because you couldn't afford to lose your job, about how many other caregivers are in similar positions, staying silent about abuse or neglect because they need the income. It's a real problem," Naomi agreed. She'd been thinking about it too, especially now that she was deeper into her nursing program and learning about healthcare systems and patient advocacy. "What if we created a foundation?" Julian proposed. "Something to support caregivers who want to pursue healthcare education. Scholarships, yes, but also legal protection, job placement assistance, support networks. We could help people like you get the education they need while also empowering them to speak up about patient welfare without fear of retaliation." Naomi stared at him, her mind racing. "That's brilliant. There's nothing like that currently. Most caregiver programs focus on training, but not on the systemic issues that keep people from being able to afford education or speak up about problems they witness." "Would you want to help me run it?" Julian asked. "I have the business experience and the funding, but you have the direct experience. You know what caregivers need because you've been there. Together, we could build something meaningful." Over the next few months, while Naomi continued her nursing studies and planned their wedding, she and Julian worked on launching the foundation. They called it the Eleanor Harrington Foundation for Caregiver Excellence, honoring the woman who'd brought them together. Julian provided the initial funding, but they also reached out to other donors, people who'd had similar experiences with family members needing care. The response was overwhelming. Stories poured in from across the country about caregivers who'd witnessed abuse, neglect, or inadequate care but couldn't speak up because they couldn't risk their jobs. Naomi threw herself into designing the program. Working with Julian and a team of advisors, they created a comprehensive support system. Scholarships for certified nursing assistant programs, LPN and RN degrees. Legal assistance for caregivers who witnessed patient mistreatment. Job placement services. Even emergency financial support for caregivers facing retaliation. "We should also have a reporting system," Naomi suggested during one planning meeting. "A way for caregivers to anonymously report concerns about patient care. We could investigate and involve appropriate authorities when necessary." "That's perfect," Julian agreed. "We'll need a legal team to handle that, but it's exactly the kind of systemic support that's missing." Eleanor watched the foundation take shape with pride and joy. Her health had continued to improve under Naomi's care, and she was now able to walk short distances with a walker. She attended every foundation planning meeting she could, offering insights from her own experience as a patient. "Make sure you include family education too," she suggested at one meeting. "Families need to know what good care looks like, what red flags to watch for." If Julian had known what to look for, he might have noticed Camille's behavior sooner. They added family education materials to the foundation's mission, creating resources for people whose loved ones needed in-home care. 3 months before the wedding, the Eleanor Harrington Foundation officially launched. They held a small ceremony at the main house, with press coverage and several politicians in attendance. Julian gave a speech about his mother's experience and Naomi's courage. Naomi spoke about the challenges caregivers face and the foundation's mission to support them. "My sister raised me after our parents died," Naomi said during her speech. "She sacrificed her own dreams to give me a childhood. Now she struggles with chronic illness, and I've seen firsthand how difficult it is to navigate the healthcare system when you're working class. This foundation is for people like Tasha, like me, like every caregiver who's ever felt trapped between doing what's right and paying their bills. We're here to say you don't have to choose. We'll support you." The speech was covered by several news outlets. Within a week, the foundation had received over 500 applications for the first scholarship class. Naomi and Julian spent hours reviewing applications, moved by the stories of struggle and determination. "Look at this one," Julian said one evening, showing Naomi an application. "Single mother of 3, working as a home health aide, wants to become an RN but can't afford the tuition. She witnessed a patient being financially exploited by family members and reported it, then lost her job for making waves. She's exactly who we're here to help," Naomi said. "Accept her." They selected 30 caregivers for the first scholarship class, providing full tuition, living expenses, and legal support if needed. Naomi visited the orientation, meeting the recipients and hearing their stories. She saw herself in each of them, saw the same determination and hope she'd felt when Julian first offered to pay for her education. "You're changing lives," one woman told her, gripping Naomi's hands tightly. "I never thought I'd be able to go to nursing school. I thought I'd be cleaning houses and changing bedpans until I was too old to work. Now I have a chance at a real career, at stability for my family. Thank you." Naomi hugged her, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for being brave enough to apply. Now go make the most of this opportunity." As the wedding approached, Naomi found herself balancing multiple roles: nursing student, foundation director, Eleanor's caregiver, and Julian's fiancé. It was a lot, but it felt right. She was using her experience to help others, building something that would outlast her, creating a legacy of care and advocacy. "Are you happy?" Julian asked her one night as they reviewed foundation reports in bed. "Deliriously happy," Naomi said honestly. "A year ago, I was broke, exhausted, and hopeless. Now I'm engaged to the man I love, I'm almost done with nursing school, and I'm helping create something that will support hundreds of caregivers. It's almost too good to be true." "It's not too good to be true," Julian assured her. "It's what you deserve. What you've always deserved. You just needed someone to see it and give you a chance. You gave me more than a chance," Naomi said. "You gave me a partnership. A voice. The opportunity to turn my pain into purpose. We gave that to each other," Julian corrected. "You reminded me what matters. Family, integrity, using my resources to actually help people instead of just accumulating more wealth. We're better together." "Yes, we are," Naomi agreed, kissing him softly. "And we're going to do so much good together." The foundation continued to grow, attracting national attention. Healthcare organizations reached out to partner with them. Legislators began discussing bills to provide more protection for whistleblower caregivers. The Eleanor Harrington Foundation was becoming a model for systemic change in the caregiving industry. And through it all, Naomi continued her studies, maintained her care of Eleanor, and planned a wedding that would unite two families who'd found each other through the most unlikely circumstances. Tasha was her maid of honor, standing beside her sister with pride and joy. Eleanor was radiant in the front row, healthy and happy. And Julian looked at Naomi like she was the only woman in the world. But the wedding was still a few months away. First, Naomi had to finish nursing school, pass her licensing exam, and officially become an RN. She was so close to achieving her lifelong dream, and nothing was going to stop her now. Graduation day arrived in late spring, with sunshine streaming through the windows of the community college auditorium. Naomi sat with her nursing class, cap and gown, feeling surreal after years of dreaming about this moment. In the audience, Julian, Eleanor, and Tasha sat together, waiting to watch her walk across the stage. When they called her name, Naomi Brooks, Bachelor of Science in Nursing, she stood and walked to the stage with her head high. The applause from her family was loud enough to carry over everyone else's polite clapping. She caught Julian's eye as she accepted her diploma, and the pride in his expression made her tear up. After the ceremony, they gathered for photos. Eleanor insisted on getting one with Naomi in her cap and gown, diploma in hand. "My daughter, the nurse," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, dear." "I couldn't have done it without you," Naomi replied. "Without both of you." The licensing exam was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Naomi studied relentlessly, reviewing every note, every textbook chapter, every practice question. Julian quizzed her in the evenings, Eleanor provided moral support, and Tasha called daily with encouragement. The day of the exam, Julian drove Naomi to the testing center and waited outside the entire 4 hours. When she emerged, exhausted but hopeful, he pulled her into his arms. "How do you think you did?" he asked. "I think I passed," Naomi said. "I won't know for sure for a few weeks, but I feel good about it." She did pass. The notification came via email on a Tuesday morning. "Congratulations, you have successfully passed the NCLE-XRN examination." Naomi read the words 3 times before letting herself believe them. She was officially a registered nurse. Julian insisted on celebrating with an elegant dinner, just the 3 of them. At the restaurant, he raised his glass for a toast. "To Naomi Brooks, RN. The most dedicated, compassionate nurse I've ever known. May this be just the beginning of an incredible career. To following your dreams," Eleanor added. "And to the courage it takes to keep going when the path is difficult. To family," Naomi finished. "To the people who believe in you and help you become who you're meant to be." With her nursing degree complete and her license secured, Naomi officially transitioned her role with Eleanor. She was no longer a caregiver but a visiting nurse who came by regularly to check on her patient and friend. Eleanor no longer needed full-time care anyway. Her health had stabilized beautifully, and she'd regained most of her independence. This freed Naomi to focus more on the foundation, which had grown beyond their wildest expectations. They'd awarded scholarships to over 100 caregivers in the first year alone. Several of the first scholarship recipients were already working as CNAs and LPNs, pursuing further education with the Foundation's continued support. The Foundation had also successfully intervened in 12 cases of caregiver retaliation, providing legal support and helping caregivers find new employment after they'd reported abuse or neglect. The reporting system Naomi had suggested was working, with tips leading to investigations and improved patient care in several facilities. "We're making a real difference," Naomi told Julian one evening as they reviewed quarterly reports. "Look at these testimonials. Families thanking us for training caregivers who actually care. Caregivers thanking us for giving them career opportunities. Patients thanking us for creating a system where people feel safe reporting problems." "You built this," Julian said. "I provided the funding, but you designed the programs, you understood what was needed. This is your legacy, Naomi." "It's our legacy," she corrected. "We're partners, remember?" Their wedding was planned for June, a small ceremony in the mansion's garden. They'd kept the guest list intimate, just 50 people who mattered most to them. Tasha was maid of honor. James Porter, Julian's attorney who'd become a good friend, was best man. Eleanor would give a reading. The week before the wedding, Eleanor called them both to her sitting room. "I have something for you," she said, handing Naomi a small velvet box. Inside was a beautiful pearl necklace. "This was my mother's. She gave it to me on my wedding day, and I wore it when I married Julian's father. I want you to have it now." "Eleanor, I can't," Naomi started, but the older woman shook her head. "You can and you will. You're my daughter now, in every way that matters. This necklace belongs to the Harrington family, and you're part of that family." Naomi put on the necklace, and Eleanor fastened the clasp. Looking at herself in the mirror, wearing this family heirloom, Naomi felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't the struggling maid anymore. She wasn't the woman who believed she didn't deserve good things. She was Naomi Brooks, soon to be Naomi Harrington, registered nurse, foundation director, beloved daughter and partner. The wedding day was perfect. The garden was decorated simply with white flowers and twinkling lights. Naomi wore an elegant but understated dress, the pearl necklace glowing against her skin. Tasha walked her down the aisle, since their father wasn't there to do it. When Naomi reached the front where Julian waited, he took her hands and whispered, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." The ceremony was short but meaningful. They'd written their own vows, promises to support each other's dreams, to face challenges together, to build a life based on love and partnership. "I promise to always see you for who you really are," Julian said. "To never take you for granted, to honor the strength and courage that drew me to you in the first place." "I promise to always speak my truth," Naomi replied. "To stand beside you as an equal partner, to build a life together that honors both our pasts and our hopes for the future." When the officiant pronounced them married, the small gathering erupted in applause. Julian kissed his bride, and Naomi felt like her heart might burst with happiness. At the reception, Eleanor gave a toast that left no dry eyes in the garden. "I've watched my son grow from boy to man, watched him struggle and succeed, make mistakes and learn from them. But I've never seen him as happy as he is with Naomi. She saved my life, yes, but more than that, she saved this family. She reminded us what matters. Love, loyalty, the courage to stand up for what's right. Welcome to the family, my dear daughter. We're better because you're part of us." The party continued into the evening, with dancing and laughter and joy. At one point, Naomi found herself standing with Tasha, watching Julian dance with Eleanor. "You did it," Tasha said, putting her arm around her sister. "You found your happily ever after." "We both did," Naomi corrected. "The foundation is covering your treatment costs now. You're getting better. We both got what we needed. Because you were brave enough to take a risk," Tasha said. "I'm proud of you, little sister. Mom and Dad would be so proud." As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, Julian pulled Naomi aside to the gazebo where they'd had their first real conversation months ago. "So, Mrs. Harrington," he said, pulling her close. "How does it feel?" "Surreal." "Perfect. Like coming home," Naomi said honestly. "A year and a half ago, I was cleaning houses and dreaming of nursing school. Now I'm married to the love of my life, I have my nursing degree, and I'm running a foundation that's changing lives. It's everything I never let myself hope for. This is just the beginning," Julian promised. "We're going to do so much more together. The foundation is growing, we'll expand to more states, help more caregivers. And eventually, if you want, we'll have a family of our own. Little Harringtons running around, driving mother crazy. I'd like that," Naomi said softly. "All of it. The work, the family, the life we're building together." They stood in the gazebo as the sun set, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, who'd built something beautiful out of difficult circumstances. The past was behind them, Camille's cruelty, Naomi's struggles, all of it. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility. Inside the mansion, Eleanor watched them through the window and smiled. Her son had found real love. Her family had expanded to include this remarkable young woman who'd shown such courage. And together, they were making the world a little bit better, one caregiver at a time. 6 months later, the Eleanor Harrington Foundation announced its expansion to 3 additional states. Naomi, now officially serving as executive director, gave interviews about their mission and vision. Her story inspired countless other caregivers to speak up, to pursue their dreams, to believe they deserved better. And at home, in the mansion that had become her true home, Naomi would sit with Eleanor in the evenings, reviewing foundation reports, planning new initiatives, and talking about the future. Julian would join them after work, and they'd have dinner together as a family. One evening, after Eleanor had gone to bed and Julian and Naomi were cleaning up the kitchen together, Naomi paused to look around. At the home she'd once cleaned as a maid, now lived in as an equal partner. At the life she'd built through courage, hard work, and the willingness to accept help when it was offered. "What are you thinking?" Julian asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I'm thinking about that day I stood up to Camille," Naomi said. "How terrified I was, But how I couldn't just walk away. If I'd stayed silent, if I'd been too afraid to risk my job, none of this would have happened. You saved more than my mother that day, Julian said quietly. You saved me too. You showed me what really matters. What kind of man I wanted to be. We saved each other, Naomi corrected, turning to face him. And we're going to keep saving people. One caregiver, one patient, one family at a time. And they did. The Eleanor Harrington Foundation grew into a national organization, setting the standard for caregiver support and patient advocacy. Naomi completed her master's degree in nursing administration. Julian restructured his business to focus more on social impact investing. Eleanor lived to see her granddaughter born 3 years later, a little girl with Julian's eyes and Naomi's smile. But more than any professional success or personal milestone, what mattered most was what they'd built together. A family based on love and mutual respect. A legacy of caring for others. A life that proved that sometimes, standing up for what's right leads you exactly where you're meant to be. And Naomi Brooks Harrington, the woman who'd once thought herself unworthy of good things, spent the rest of her life proving that courage, kindness, and the willingness to help others could change everything.